Hi Jane, welcome back.
Thanks, Sharon. Great to be here.
On the couch with Jack.
On the couch
the famous
with Jack.
dog.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming. We love interviewing you. Today we're going to be talking about resilience. How do we build resilience?
Yes.
And I know that this is a topic that you've had to build with, some stuff that's been going on for you recently, and I know that you want to share that to help other people.
Yeah. Well, look, it's interesting that we've got Jack here with us, isn't it? Because immediately you sit down and connect with, a beautiful soul like Jack. You feel your system calm down, don't you? I've come, across Sydney Harbour Bridge in the car. The traffic was a nightmare, and this is a busy place. We're in the lead up to Christmas. Life can be nuts sometimes. And my life in particular, there'll be periods where things are thrown up that you can't possibly plan for. A couple of years ago, I was made redundant from a very well-paying role. And why do I mention that now? Because I've been working really, really, really hard on building my business up. And at the age of 52, to be made redundant, to have never run a business before, to have really pushed the barrow uphill, as you do, yes, Jack, as you do, has just been exhausting, frankly. Yeah. Now there's the exhaustion.
Jack's never done this before.
That's all right.
Jack.
No, because I think I've, woken something up in Jack, and he wants to contribute.
All right.
To
as long as you're okay with that
conversation. Yeah. Anyway. So your energy level, if your energy level is low, if your self-care hasn't been great, then that is going to affect your resilience for when life throws things at you. Now, I have a teenage daughter, as I say, I have a business. Teenagehood can be tricky. I have a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous daughter. But the challenges of walking that fine line of how I let her grow in independence and have trust in her own decisions versus my responsibility as a mother to keep her safe, ultimately. But then not wanting her to need to be as safe as I needed to be for most of my life. The box that I had built around myself before I did the work on my own limiting beliefs was so constrained. It was such a small box, and I would not wish that on my daughter in a million years, but this kind of fine line that you walk with them. And I won't go into detail, but some of her decisions haven't been the best lately, and we've had to have conversations around that, and that's all fine. But from my point of view, the resilience that I need to have in those circumstances so that I'm not triggered and that I don't act out my own fears that may yet to be completely processed and worked through, because we know we're a work in progress as humans, don't we? We know, and I used to think, when can I get to the end of this healing? When will it be finished? When will it be done? Well, we all know now that this is not the way things work.
It's never ending.
That, in fact, the point of it is the healing.
Yeah.
It's not the end. That we're not running to the finishing line. We're living a life of integrity and wholeness. Or at least that's what we're aiming for. So I will get to the point then of how to build resilience, because that is what I want to talk about today. But just to give a sense that, I have been tested in that regard recently.
Yeah.
So to take out of what I've said so far, and the point of saying what I've said so far, is that there's the question of self-care ongoingly. And that's why I mentioned the level of exhaustion that I'd let myself fall prey to. And then there's the question of what can you do to actively then build a skill like resilience. So from a self-care point of view, I have a strategy around at least 3 times a day spending 3 minutes with myself and fully with myself, and that's about being present in the here and now. And how we do that is that we just sit quietly, stand quietly, and you might not be alone necessarily. That might be difficult to achieve in the middle of the day, for example. But you just quietly go within. Again, if you're in a public place and you don't want to close your eyes, that doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You just consciously feel into your body and just notice things. Notice things about how do you feel? Is there tension anywhere? Notice that your mind might throw up thoughts and ideas. That's not a problem. That doesn't mean that you're not present and you're not here. That's just what your mind will do. And if you can build a practice around that, and it'll feel strange at first if you've never done this kind of thing before, but there is just that magic that there is, that within the 3 minutes there might be 30 seconds worth of it. But it's when you really, really feel what's down deep in there. And that is a very quiet and a very calm place. So the difference that you can make to yourself 3 times a day by doing that will build you to a point where you're not operating at this close to your tolerance level. Let's say if you go into your stress response here, you want to be operating down here, so that something major, and one of the things that's happened for me in the last couple of months is that I had a car accident. It wasn't a serious one, but it certainly throws your plans for the day out, that's for sure. So, because I wasn't sitting as low in terms of my general state to my stress response, I really definitely hit that stress response. And when you do, then it can take some time to bring yourself back down. Easy to be stuck in the trap of staying up there, especially if you're like me, and I had lived most of my life up there. Before I did the work on myself, really, I thought that's what living felt like. And I thought that's what success felt like as well. And I've spoken about this on one of your other videos, Sharon, where if we mistakenly hook something like stress, or I should say hook success onto something like stress, and in fact existence onto something like stress, then we're at best missing out on a lot of great feelings that we could be having, but at worst really setting ourselves up for early death and highly avoidable illnesses that come from having the amount of inflammation in our body that stress results in. So the how-to here is 3 times a day to just quieten your system down and just to remember what it feels like to not be focusing out there and just focusing in here, and to build that skill up over time. And it might be when you first wake up, might be then before you go to sleep, and it might be in the middle of the day at lunchtime. It's good to have ways to remember to do this. So that then, let's say you're at a general level of operating well and you want to build resilience. It's about looking at what have you done in the past when you've been really challenged. If you're here today, then surely you have had challenges in the past and you've overcome them. So what have you done in the past that's worked for you, and building on that, or at least remembering that that is what you have in your kit bag. So for a lot of people, and for me, the resilience thing, it's the bounce back. The thing about resilience is bouncing back from when something tough or challenging happens. So the bounce back for me now is always about talking about it. Not bottling it down, not pushing it down. Again, I had too many years of just, being the great coper, but in fact not coping at all, because coping for me meant just pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. Actually externalising any worries you've got. I just spoke to you now about that thing of the responsibility of a teenager and the push and the pull of doing the right thing by them. I've spoken that out. I've externalised that. I haven't now, no, this is not the first time I've done it, obviously. I've done that with her. I've spoken to her about that. And just externalising any concerns we've got is a brilliant thing to do. Ditto, writing things down. Again, that's externalising it. I'm just talking about, I guess, another way of externalising, but writing any concerns down. And in particular, I learnt myself, so this isn't me being brilliant about designing something like this, but I learnt myself a little ways back the value of sitting down with 3 pieces of paper and just quietening yourself down and just doing a brain dump of anything that's on your mind at the moment. And when you think you've finished, ask, what else? What else? What else? So that you'll be pulling out things like, you might not even realise that that's sitting there somewhere. Things like worrying about when I get older, how am I going to manage not having necessarily an active mind like I have now, or not having the amount of mobility I have now. That was something I unearthed.
Wow.
This really, essentially, irrational fear of losing my mental capacity. And of course we know the benefit of not having negative beliefs like that, because that was a belief that was actually programming me, or at least predisposing me to get that result. Well, we don't want that.
No.
So any of this deep stuff that you can pull out and that you can put on a piece of paper, you're then going to look at that list and you're going to ask yourself, well, what can I do something about? I'm going to have 2 more lists here, and one of them has the title of what I can do something about, and the other one is what I can't do anything about. So you're then going to look at your list here and you're going to transfer everything onto either this list or that list. So you've got one list you can do something about and one list you can't do something about. Now, of course, if on my list here was that I'm afraid of getting older, well, I can't do anything about getting older, but I can do something about the way I'm feeling about it. So in a sense, you're putting that on the 2 lists. But what you've done is that you've identified the part of the fear that isn't worth having anymore. You know, so you're going to get a list here of the things you can't do anything about, and then you're going to just destroy that list. You'll burn it, you'll bury it, you'll flush it down the toilet, you'll rip it up and put it in the bin, whatever feels good to you. And it doesn't mean that things on there aren't important, but it just means that you don't want that playing in your mind. You don't want that taking up part of the really, really, really useful real estate that you've got in your head there, that you want to be making, you know, building your life around the sharpness of your thoughts and the ideas and the, you know, access to your emotions. You don't want to have your mind clogged up with all of this material, which is what it really is. So you're going to have your list there of the things you can't do anything about. You've got your list here of the things you can do something about. And then you want to grab your diary and you want to have a look at any actions around those things. So I'm really kind of compressing a strategy that I teach people in my workshops. But you're going to be actioning those things and putting them in your diary. And then, of course, this is not Pollyanna's world that we live in. This is the real world. So we know we don't get around to doing everything in our diary when we say we will. But what you're going to be able to unearth when you're doing this exercise is if there's anything that you have to keep moving that is just always out of reach for you to deal with, then you'll want to ask yourself, look, what is it about this particular action that I never get around to doing? What is it? Is there baggage here, or are there unrealistic expectations that I'm putting on myself? So it's really a much, I think you might have thought, oh, that's okay, that's simple enough, yep, 3 pieces of paper. Well, it goes quite deep really once you get the diary entries down and you get to see what your behaviour is around those various actions. But what you do is it's like a funnel. You're taking this big, I should go like that because there's the camera, you're taking this big amount of concerns that have either been conscious or unconscious, and then you're narrowing it down to bits of work that you might want to do and that you might want to get some help on doing, because we both know that we can't help ourselves. There comes a point where we can't help ourselves as much as someone else can help us, and that help may just come in the form of somebody sitting there and saying very, very little, as Sharon is doing now. You know, I used to think it was a bit crazy that when I was getting you know, some help with my issues back in the day, it'd be crazy that I'm doing all the talking and all of the work, and that person I'm paying is just sitting there. And I remember, this is a crazy story too, I remember coming home to my husband one day when I was really in the early days of getting my coach training, and I remember saying to him, I couldn't possibly do this work. I don't know how I ever thought I could do this work. And he'd say, why? What's happened? And I said, well, it's just too hard. And he said, I don't think it's too hard from the person from the point of view of the person on that side of the table. He said, I think it's just hard for you at the moment because you're resisting the change that you know you want to make. And it was such very wise words, such wise words. So I suppose really I can tend to ramble a little bit, you know that about me, Sharon, but let me wrap up by saying, here's the two things about resilience that I wanted to throw onto the table today. And there was that one about your general state. So being in a state where you're not so likely to push into your tolerance level there. And that's about the 3 minutes, 3 times a day of just being quiet with yourself and going inside and just closing off the white noise. Just for those periods throughout the day. And then there's the question of looking at what's worked for you in the past in terms of helping you overcome difficulties, so that you can always remember you're never alone and you're never at a loss. And then just building on those things. Just looking at what else might help. What else can I be conscious of?
And also noticing what hasn't worked for you in the past and changing it.
That's a good one,
because a lot of
Sharon,
us will just repeat the same old patterns. So I think that's really important to really...
That's good, thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you. So that's probably it for me now.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants any help in regard to their resilience, there's of course you at Global Healing Exchange, Sharon, and there's me at wellnesscoachingcollective.com.
Cool.
So I'd love to help, and I'd love to know that people just know that we're there, because that's part of the resilience too. Knowing that you're not alone, because none of us are.
Yeah, knowing that there's support there, whether it's through me or through Jane or through friends listening to you. I think this is really, leading up to Christmas, really important, because so many people are in overwhelm, and I think the paper thing that you said about would be amazing for helping people chunk down so they're not overwhelmed with all of the things that we have to do. So thank you so much for coming in today and making that really crystal clear for people to action at home.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Jack, for being such a model of being in the here and now. Because aren't dogs? I love dogs. Yeah.
Say goodbye, Jack. Okay, cool. Thank you. Just before you go, just say your website again.
Yeah, so it's wellnesscoachingcollective.com.
Cool, thank you.